of deceit. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Thursday, the 27th of August, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we have some new developments in the surveillance state. I think you're going to find these outrageous and amusing at the same time, but it's still something we need to pay attention to, and you will soon own nothing. Just as Klaus Schwab has been telling us, the latest example, even the video games that they use to distract and pacify the public. And of course, Yuval Harari talked about that. That's how we're going to control people. Have drugs and entertainment and games, but you won't even be allowed to own that. And the fight that is being put out by Grand Theft Auto, Part 6, to try to cover this up, reveals some very interesting things about the information that's being kept on you by the corporations and about the alliance for surveillance that shows as well. And we're also going to talk about the measles myth. 2 deaths, really, in Pennsylvania? Just happens to be the state that is most heavily connected to the pharmaceutical industry at a time there is a massive PR push. Folks, this is the COVID playbook all over again. And Tony Arterman will be joining us to talk about what's going on with the price of gold as they're going to be meeting in Jackson Hole today. Well, let's begin with the surveillance state. You know, flock cameras are everywhere. As one person pointed out, Hannibal 1999 on X said, "This is not democracy. This is a publicly subsidized private intelligence grid." That's exactly what it is. And if you look not at the name that they market themselves as, Flock Safety, but if you go back and look as one guy who's now retired engineer, and now he's focusing on privacy and technology issues, he said, if you go back and look at their original patent filing, you find out they call it a surveillance network. This is not a camera on the corner. This is a surveillance network. That's just one node. Every piece of it was technically, there wasn't a single piece of it that was technically approved. There was no voter initiative. There's no voter consultation, no legislature. As a matter of fact, they don't want you to even know that they're doing it before they put in these data centers or these flock cameras. Again, a council of 7 people in a suburb of 20,000 consents. 7 people out of 20,000. What do those people get from the corporation? And then you've got 330 million people who get captured as part of a network. That's the way that it happens one at a time. I mean, they go in and they can do NDAs and who knows what kind of backroom deals they're doing with these people at the lowest level. Shouldn't call them flunkies, we should call them floxies. But anyway, they use that type of leverage to get surveillance on the scale of the entire continent. Public funds its own surveillance. Taxpayers pay the subscription fees for the system that records them. Private terrorist companies then own the routing layer, and the police own the queries. The public owns the obligation to be photographed and to pay for it all. The municipal contracts subsidize it. Flock extracts the aggregated movement data. The underwriters and commodity traders and the federal government profit from all this. And the pitch is crime prevention. But it is a Trojan horse that unlocks municipal budgets and it bypasses federal surveillance restrictions. And so we've lost all control of the police. I just talked about it yesterday in Knoxville, in Knox County, where Glenn Jacobs, former wrestler Kane, is the mayor, the highest elected official in the county. They found, as they had a flock meeting that was scheduled for Monday, the CEO doesn't show up. He was supposed to show up and answer questions. He didn't. And then on further inspection, they found that the police had taken it upon themselves to start buying these things in a structured way. If they spend $25,000 or more, they have to get approval. But what they started doing was to buy these things at $24,990 a month. A secret payment plan, if you will, right? And so they started doing this under the wire. So Glenn Jacobs called him out on it and said, well, yeah, but the aggregate of your total purchases is more than you're allowed to do without a without an authorization. And look at the way these things are being used. Here's an example, latest example we see. This is a trucking company. They got a notification from Lake County in Florida, the sheriff's department. It said, we noticed that you were driving a truck on a road that is not allowed, trucks are not allowed to be on. Okay, so that's not the issue, folks. The issue is that they're using this not to fight crime. They want to tell you, just like the lies that Trump puts out there about his masked goons that don't pay any attention to due process or excessive force or anything else. They want to tell you, oh, well, this is, we need to have an immigration enforcement. And I agree that we need to have enforcement of immigration laws, but not that way. We should not have a lawless gang that is out there doing it. And they're telling you, oh, we're getting the worst of the worst, and yet they're not. They're going out and brutalizing people who have lived peacefully in this country for 35 years, not even on welfare. We've seen that over and over again. And so he also got this notification that showed the details. It says, here's a picture we took of you. Here's your license plate. And it says right here, it says truck is what they're looking for, right? So they're using this for every kind of infraction. This is not about finding the missing granny who has Alzheimer's or something. It's not about that at all. This is about the police escalating their petty crimes, going out and grabbing people for minor violations. And then in addition to that, you had another jurisdiction where, and I think this was also in Florida. Yeah, it was. They put up decoy cameras. They 3D printed fake flock cameras, put them up, and then waiting for an ambush to arrest people that might vandalize them. And they found somebody who did it. As a matter of fact, here is the report. Well, this is actually a picture, not a report. This is Pflugerville, and this is just outside of Austin. They have canceled a $175,000 contract with Flock after a public records request revealed nearly 460 agencies had access to this data. That's what they said they were going to create, a surveillance network. But when we look at this decoy camera that was taken down, this is, again, something that was 3D printed. It's not a camera. It's not a computer. It's a new approach to fighting back against the people who are angry, the new Tea Party people. Highlighting a fierce battle between law enforcement departments, we've signed contracts with Flock and the citizens who are unwilling to be under constant surveillance by the company's many thousands of license plate reading cameras and creating a massive surveillance network. Look, we know how this is going to be used. And since we know how this is going to be abused, they should never have this power. It's not enough for them to say, trust me. Look at what the police in Knox County did. Yeah, trust me. I'm going to game the system. I know I'm not allowed to buy these things, but I'm going to buy them and give $10 below the $25,000 threshold so nobody sees me do this. And so in Florida, it was Ovidio, Florida, if that's the way it's pronounced. I don't know. Never heard of that. I grew up in Florida. But anyway, this guy was charged with attempted larceny and grand theft. They're coming after him for 3 felonies. I guess Harvey Silverglate was right. We commit 3 felonies a day. Mischief of property damage worth more than $1,000 and property crimes against computer equipment supplies. Well, that's a lie, because it's not worth more than $1,000. They didn't spend more than $1,000 to create a 3D decoy, print it up, and it doesn't have any computer equipment in it. It's not a real camera. So the whole thing is a lie. These Flock bait cameras were made to closely resemble a real Flock camera, but did not cost the same and did not collect any data within the device. It was not even real. That's like putting out, you think, well, I'm going to get somebody who's hunting ducks without a license. Elmer Fudd is out there. I just know he's out there. And so you put out some decoy ducks and somebody shoots a decoy duck and you charge them with hunting out of season or hunting without a license or something. This is ridiculous. Despite the 3D printed decoy only being worth a couple of dollars at most, he was hit with the full amount of what an actual camera would cost if he had done the damage. So they're charging him as if he hit a real camera, but he didn't. And so The other thing that's interesting about this, the mayor was very upset about this. She said she was speechless when she was contacted by the press. I guess we all would be. Said, while vandalism is wrong, she said a majority of the council agreed to consider ending flock just days before this happened. See, the police, though, have their own agenda. This is what should scare you about what the cops are doing. They are the ones who are behind this police surveillance state. Criminals, they can't handle the temptation. Look at the hundreds of them now that have been arrested, fired for these types of abuses. They can't handle this. They should not be given these tools. They're already abusing it at the beginning of it just to get these things in place. That's how desperate they are to run the surveillance state against you. Considering that a grand jury in Ohio declined to bring felony charges against a man who had destroyed an actual flock camera earlier this month, perhaps this is a sign that these people have gone a bit too far. And I think they have. As a matter of fact, here's the report here. This is an Ohio grand jury refused to prosecute a patriot who destroyed the flock cameras. They threw out his case. That, folks, is the power of the jury. We will never have our rights protected by a government court. That's the government saying that they're going to police themselves. They don't do that. Who watches the watchers? Who controls the police? You do through a jury, not through a court of appeals. They will not bring these people to heel. And we got another example of that coming up. No, the real solution, folks, is not to stop this unconstitutional police surveillance state that's being put in camera by camera. The solution is jury nullification. Number one, a jury cannot be wrong. You cannot be tried for the same crime twice, is the other aspect of this. And when a jury sits in judgment, they are there to judge not only the facts of the case, you are there as a jurist to judge whether or not the law is good and whether or not the punishment is excessive. That is what the founders and our Western civilization tradition gave us. And again, it goes back to the very case that established habeas corpus. It also established jury nullification. And just to recount this, I've talked about this before. But you had the Quakers who had were in defiance of the British law that as William Penn, who was the leader of the Quakers, and eventually they left England and helped to set up Pennsylvania. But it was against the law to go to a church that was not the official state church. And so they kept meeting in defiance of that law because it was not legitimate, and not legitimate in terms of moral issues, I would say. But it was the law. It was clearly the law. And so the government padlocked the doors to their meeting house. So then they met outside the meeting house and held their worship service on the steps. Then they arrested William Penn. Then they brought him to trial. 2 jurors there. One of them, the foreman of the jury, was named William Bushnell. There's a good little book about that, The Ordeal of William Bushnell. But both the foreman of the jury and the number 2 guy, whatever his title was, assistant foreman or whatever, both of them were sent to jail by the judge for coming up with that verdict. But see, a jury cannot be wrong. And so their lawyers, after they sat in jail for a while, their lawyers said, show us the law, show us habeas corpus. What law did they violate? And the judge couldn't show a law that they had violated. So they were let go. It established habeas corpus and jury nullification at the same time. We have many state constitutions that have that in the Constitution, that the jurors are there to judge not just the facts, but the legitimacy of the law and whether or not the punishment is excessive. And yet you'll have judge after judge who will tell the jurors exactly the opposite. You're not here to judge the law. You're here to just judge the facts of the case. That is a lie when they tell you that. And yet the reality is that if they're having a trial, many times the lawyers themselves will expose somebody who is a fully informed juror, who understands what the role of the jury is. They'll kick those people off. So if you do it, be wise about that and don't broadcast it. So grand jury in Ohio lets a guy go. They put felony charges against him for destroying one of these things. And the people there, this is why I say this is an important moment that we have to try to build on. This is why I start out with this today and most days now, because we have to start building bipartisan opposition to the police surveillance state, because the uni party, the Republicans and most of the Democrats, are for this. Some Democrats are wisely opposing it. And now even some Republicans like Greg Abbott are starting to pull back a little bit. Don't believe it for a minute. Don't believe people like Mike Rogers. Of all people, he is Exhibit A. He's running for Senate in Michigan. He was a congressman and one of the people pushing the militarized police state more than anyone else. And now he tells you, well, I think we need to wait until we've got some rules in place and some guidelines and guardrails. They will ignore those guidelines and guardrails just like they ignore the Constitution. So again, they use a fake camera. They charge the guy with 3 felonies. This is just a 3D piece of plastic that they put up. But they give him charges saying that he caused more than $1,000 worth of damage, grand theft involving property valued at between $750 and $5,000, and damaging or taking a computer, electronic device, or related equipment. Except there was no electronic equipment as part of this. There was no computer. And it did not cost $5,000. Like I said before, this is like coming after somebody for poaching or hunting without a license when they shoot a decoy that you put out. So the mayor is very honest with us. That said, to be totally honest, I'm disappointed. I'm pissed off about it. And this is not there, but this is in Savannah, Georgia. This is yet other politicians who have to answer to the public are concerned about what their police department is doing. And so in Savannah, Georgia, 4 police department workers were hauled into custody last Friday when an investigation by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation uncovered that they'd been abusing their city's flock system to track personal acquaintances and family members, maybe stalk some women. This is something we've seen over and over again. 2 more employees were fired weeks ago for similar offenses. This is a second wave. So even though they fired a couple of people a couple of weeks ago, you still had others continue to do it. It's become a huge scandal for Savannah, Georgia over the past 4 weeks. And it's become now a poster child for police abuse of these AI surveillance systems. We entrusted these individuals with advanced technology when with the public's trust, said the mayor. Who would imagine that they would violate that trust? Were you born yesterday? It remains to be seen what exactly these 4 were using the flock system for, but the fact that they were arrested suggests a major breach of trust. And it's the second wave of this. And so what is flock safety all really about? As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, that is the name that they operate under. And that's what the CEO is going around telling everybody. Well, and I played the clip for you. He went on with Kayleigh McEnany, and she was like a deer in the headlights, just, oh, yeah, whatever you say, I'll go along with it, right? And he's out there saying, well, we've all got to be safe. That's our number one priority. If you want to make safety the number one priority, then you are going to live in a police surveillance state. No doubt about it. You'll never be safe enough, right? So always have to have some more police around. And you will have more and more things taken away from you. So he says, we've got to have a compromise here. I understand. I like privacy. Yes, he does. Boy, he guards his and the company's privacy jealously. And they do not comply with freedom of information requests. And you've had some jurisdictions that got caught up in that. You know, they signed an NDA with the company, but they've got the responsibility as a government agency to comply with freedom of information requests. And so what do you do when somebody wants to have information about that? Well, you wind up with a lawsuit from one party or the other. This particular case, they sided with the corporation and said, no, we can't give that to you. So the person sued them and got $300,000 from them. And so these people who are doing it, they tell you that you've got to come up with a compromise, says the CEO. And he's been saying this not just on Fox News with Kayleigh McEnany. He's been saying this in multiple places. Well, first thing is we've got to be safe. And so that means you're going to have a compromise. You're going to compromise your privacy, folks. You're going to compromise your liberty for safety. People who do that don't deserve either, said Benjamin Franklin. And history has shown us that you don't get safety. You just lose your privacy. You just lose your liberty. That's the only thing. You turn yourself into a prisoner in a panopticon society. These flock cameras are not just reading license plates, of course, they're reading everything, and they're reading people as well. They're putting them in places where there are no cars. This is a surveillance system that is identifying not just automobiles, not just license plates, but the automobile itself. And they're building profiles of you as well. They've even got a flock Raven system that listens to what people are saying with very sensitive microphones. But if you listen to Fox News, says Leo Hohmann, he says it's only a license plate reader that Flock is engaged in. And I got to say, why is that an only situation? Why did we and when did we decide that nothing in the Bill of Rights applies when you're traveling? You don't have any protections against unreasonable searches and seizures when you go to the airport from TSA. You don't have any protection against harassment and unnecessarily being stopped when you're driving a car. Why is that? When did we surrender our rights, which are a function of the fact that we are human beings created in the image of God? When did we give up the rights that we still have when we are traveling in a car, traveling in a plane? I just really have a problem with that. But anyway, people say, well, yeah, if it was a license plate reader, we'd be fine with that. I wouldn't even be fine with that. They allow Flock's top executive to claim that without his cameras, our cities would not be safe. Take a look at the crime in Atlanta, where they're headquartered, where they have the most density of cameras. And that exposes that lie as for what it is. So he says it's vital for safety, and we got to compromise, right? And yet Leo Hohmann said, I sat down for an interview with a one-on-one with a guy who is a former engineer. His name is John Padfield, and his YouTube channel is Business Reform. He's an electrical engineer. He spent time working at GM. Then he worked for the Indiana Department of Transportation before recently retiring and becoming an activist for freedom and privacy. Good for him. And I'll tell you that YouTube channel again. It's Business Reform. The company this company, Flock Safety, calls itself Flock Safety. They have their website is flocksafety.com. And yet Padfield went back and he said, well, let me look at their patents. They actually took out a patent on this stuff. I wouldn't even think that there would be something patentable about it. But yes, there is. And I guess, people take out junk patents. There was it created a lot of issues when the smartphones came out because somebody put it, I think you could have a device that would operate on the internet and show pictures or whatever. So somebody actually enforced that, I call it a junk patent, on companies who had to basically pay them blackmail money. But this is what the patent is titled. A system, this is what Flock really is from the people who built it. It is a system and method for object-based query of video content captured by a dynamic surveillance network. And the Flock Group changed its name to Flock Safety to market that for you. But this was back in March of 2017. It was for the purpose of creating, quote, a dynamic surveillance network and also an interstate system that would function as an integrated nationwide surveillance network. So this so-called solution, this is if you look at the patent filing and you look at the abstract, so it has a title and then has an abstract and it goes into the details. This is what the abstract says. A solution for a video surveillance system and method that leverages a dynamic geographic footprint and supports an object-based query of archived video content is described. An exemplary embodiment of the solution receives video footage from any number of unrelated sources. The video footage is then parsed for content and stored in a database, and the connections of that database identifies the content along with aspects of the object, confidence scores, time, and location data. I mean, this is like TSA. They say Transportation Security Agency. They don't say airlines, do they? They're going to eventually roll out and metastasize this TSA cancer to every form of transportation. We've seen it in the past. They have had some experimental forays into travel by train. And so we can expect that to happen. I expect it to, once they get car ownership down sufficiently, that they'll do it there as well. Anyway, it identifies the content, the object, and so forth. And again, it's not saying a car. It's not saying a license plate, because you, folks, are the object of the surveillance. Advantageously goes the abstract. It continues, the video footage may be queried based on content of the video footage and not just time and location data. So we understand that they're not just saying, well, I want to see all the information that I've got at this particular place around this particular time because that's when the crime happened or whatever. No, they can go out and look for you specifically everywhere that you have gone. And that's the way the police are abusing this. They're using it to go after individuals. And I think it's kind of interesting. We just had a court case in the Second Circuit Court. This is now the 9th U.S. Federal Circuit Court. And I don't know how many there are. I mean, I know there's a 9th Circuit Court that's out in California. It's pretty liberal. I don't know how many of them there are. Is this all of them? I would think it would say all of them if it were. But we've had 9 federal circuit courts have said that the public has a right, a First Amendment right, to record the police in public. Think about that. Think about how the police in general, not just ICE with all the garbage that they're doing to people and wearing the mask and everything, but police in general have been very prickly about people who record them. Even after we've had court decision after court decision saying that we can record you in public, but they demand that they have a right to record the public. But the public does not have a right to record the police. As I said over and over again, you want to know what the national security state is? It's a plan to know everything about us and to keep us from knowing anything about them. But I think this is a dangerous ruling. I don't see this as a victory, and I'll tell you why. They had a situation where a guy who was, he called himself a First Amendment auditing hobbyist. So he was just doing it because he didn't have anything nefarious about it. He just wanted to film the police just because they needed to be filmed. And he, I guess, was going to test the limit. So he went right up to the police station and starts filming at the police station. So after a while, a couple of cops come out and they demand his ID. Your identity papers, please. Is this not the hallmark of Nazi-occupied police state? Your identity papers, please. And this is what we see everywhere, isn't it? You got Marcia of the Beast Blackburn here, who's going to be our next governor. She's been carrying the water for Trump, who is about every kind of identification for everything that you can imagine, right? There are some places where we need to have some ID legitimately. I think if you're cashing a check, people should be able to identify that in case you give them a bad check. If you're voting, I think there should be ID. But I don't think we should have mandatory E-Verify, which is what a lot of Republicans have done in response to the government-created problem of open borders. They tell you, well, now you got to have an ID in order to be able to hire somebody. So this identity papers thing is not something that I'm on board with. And of course, this guy was not as well. So when they come up and say, show us your ID, he says, I don't have to do that. So then they arrested him for disobeying a lawful order. And unfortunately, when you look at this case, the court said, well, no, he has a right to film you, but the police have immunity and the police can ask you for your ID. So I think we're in a situation where we lost the important part of this, which is the fact that the police, even if you record them doing something wrong, they don't have to worry about it. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we're going to be right back. Tony's going to be joining us.
Decoding the mainstream propaganda. It's the David Knight Show.
Welcome Back and joining us now is Tony Arterburn of Wise Wolf Gold and Silver, and you can find Tony if you go to davidknight.gold. I'll take you to him and let him know that you came through us. And it's always great to talk to Tony. And boy, this has been a busy couple of weeks since we've talked to you, Tony. A lot of things have happened with gold. What is it that you think is most interesting that's happened with gold? I mean, you got the Fed is going to be meeting in Jackson Hole later today and make some pronouncements from on high about interest rates. I guess they call it Jackson Hole because that's where they go to bury their debt, right?
Right. I think that's probably less interesting than some of the statements that come out of the Treasury, which, Scott Bessent in an interview and actually a statement coming out saying that gold is now sanctionable. They classify that as a sanctionable asset along with aviation, crypto, other things that, Iran is evading sanctions and has been for a while through petroleum and trading that for other assets like gold and staying off of the SWIFT system. So it's really interesting.
Wow.
I don't think that's ever been said before. So now, because we've, since 1971, the U.S. Treasury has not classified gold as money. And it's been a side asset or an asset held by central banks. So it's really interesting. Another thing that happened, the executive order that came out where they classified gold as a strategic mineral. And that's never happened before either. That's something that President Trump just did in like the last week or so. So a lot of these things are pointing towards my thesis, which, and I'm not alone on this, that the world is moving back towards gold as a standard, as a world's reserve currency in a way. And I think the U.S. Treasury is getting out in front of that. He also mentioned, Scott Bessent mentioned the gold in Fort Knox. I don't think he was prompted about it. He mentioned it, and he valued the gold not only in Fort Knox, which is about half of our supposed holdings. We have about a little over 8,000 tons. He mentioned that the gold had been audited and that we have about a little over $1 trillion in gold holdings, but that's not official. You remember when we went off the gold standard, there was a brief moment where we didn't catch that runaway gold price, and then we locked it in at $42 an ounce, and then it stayed there on the balance sheet of the U.S. Treasury, not moving with the markets. So I think that's something that the Treasury, they're playing a game here. It's a long game, especially with buying the long-term bonds back. I'm sure you've been covering that. That's an unprecedented. $4 billion in long-term bonds being bought back by the Treasury in a weird roundabout QE moment, a quantitative easing by the Treasury, which is, again, something's moving as power is centralizing. Not that the Fed and the Treasury are really separate, but these moves are coming from the White House and not necessarily the Federal Reserve right now when it comes to monetary policy.
Yeah, and just print more bonds to pay off your other bonds. Take out another credit card.
Well, it's also signaling something too, which is, and something you and I've talked about. I mean, in 1980, when gold was, looked like it was just going parabolic, and they stopped that with really high interest rates with Paul Volcker and interest rates in the teens. And you and I have talked about, you can't do that anymore because of the sheer size of the debt and liabilities of the United States. It's now $40 trillion. I mean, in 1980, it was $1 trillion, and then unfunded liabilities were nothing like they are today. So you can't raise interest rates like you used to be able to. So I think the markets are responding to that. That's why Bitcoin's up 20%. Gold went up from, it was trading right at the 4,000 level about 60 days ago, and we've broken into 4,600 and beyond. Silver's back up close to $70 in that threshold again. It's the debasement trade, David. That's right. What's going on. It's funny that the debasement trade's not larger to me, because that's all I focus on. I don't know how we've even considered this market as rational.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I remember the 70s. I remember stagflation and all the rest of this stuff. And their hands are really tied because, they've got a couple little things that they do to manipulate. But if they were to play with interest rates and things like that back in the 1970s, it's like, well, okay, that's going to kind of strangle the economy, which is already stagnant or recession. And if you lower the interest rates to try to aid the economy, now you're going to stoke inflation. But now they've got something else, as you point out, this massive debt that's there. And I think that's one of the reasons why that was so important. I talked yesterday about one economist who was really the first one to be the earliest and the most accurate in terms of picking the top of the real estate securitization fraud market. And he was saying, I think they're looking at the wrong debt. They're not, they're looking at the government debt rather than the private debt. But I think it is important to look at the government debt because that takes away one of their very important manipulation tools. Imagine if we had interest rates that were 4 or 5 times what they are today. Instead of $1 trillion interest payment, we'd have $5 or $6 trillion. It's crazy. And they couldn't handle that. Right, because that would be by far and away. Right now, they're about the size of Social Security or in the defense budget, and so can you imagine interest that's 5 times the cost of Social Security or the defense budget, each of those? And so it would be by far and away the largest thing. They don't have really the tools that they need to fight inflation, and yet Trump is pushing for the Congress to go ahead and raise the debt ceiling again. He said, do it now before you lose your majority. That's the confidence he has about the midterm elections. Do it now so we don't have a fight. And Tony, he wants to raise it $5 trillion more. He's already responsible for about a third of the debt that we've accumulated in 250 years was done under Trump. Now he wants to add another $5 trillion.
Yeah, I mean, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there. Sooner or later, you're talking about real money. It is interesting that
pretty soon you're not talking about any money that's real.
No money at all, right?
That's right.
I think that's the logic here. I mean, you have Scott Bessent also saying, "Well, 40 trillion. There's no magic number. There's no magic in that, except there is. Except that there actually is. And if you look at the standard wisdom of modern economics, not that there's a lot of it, but I think it's pretty much agreed upon that debt to GDP ratio, that's the issue. It's not just the debt itself, it's the debt to the gross domestic product. And if you go and compare the financial and monetary moves that you're able to make, again, going back to 1980, which I think is a great snapshot, you can't raise interest rates anymore. So you can, but you can't go to the levels that were done to really stop gold's parabolic moves in the late 1970s and 80s. So you have this issue of debt to GDP, and most economists believe it's about 90%. Debt to GDP is where you have a breaking point where you're past a red line, and there's going to have to be some real strategic moves made in order to save the economic health of a nation. We're at 144%. As I've mentioned, I think the last appearance we talked about Japan. Japan has a debt to GDP of 250%. And the U.S. Treasury is now partnering with Japan and selling euros, by the way, to prop up the yen.
Yeah. We bought in. Let's buy into that. This is a failing country. Let's buy into that and make it our failure. It's just like we can't see a war anywhere that we don't have to get involved in. And we can't see a failing government that we don't have to prop up and subsidize.
Yeah, I think that's truly the issue, though, David, is that we can't make the moves that we used to. I mean, Scott Bessent can say it's not a magic number, but it is. I mean, the larger the debt goes up, the larger the service on the debt goes. And I think there's a reason they're testing the waters and see how the market responds with these long-term bond buybacks. Which, if you look at it, it'd make Bernie Madoff blush. And I think he even said that when he was like, I'm not the crook. I mean, you look at the financial system itself, the real criminals are running it. I mean, it's nothing compared to, what the standard system does to the everyday taxpayer, everyday American, everyday citizen of not only this country, but the entire planet. And we have a massive sovereign debt crisis. I think it's like 325 or 350 trillion, some crazy number. And global debt to GDP is way skewed. So that's why you've been hearing this for many, many years where they float the Great Reset and all this stuff. Monetarily, the whole system is imploding on itself, and it's being reset whether or not we like it or we have a say in it. They're doing that. I'm not sure, any of this stuff with the Treasury it means anything to strengthen the Treasury, or if it's just a way to give golden parachutes to those in the know. I mean, just to buy more time. This isn't about
Hmm.
strengthening the U.S. financial system.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, when you talk about, you mentioned Scott Bessent claimed, yeah, we've audited the gold at Fort Knox, and we had Rand Paul come out and say, "I've been there, I saw it all." It's like, really? Did you go through and you assay this stuff and make sure that it was real stuff, not just gold paint? Did you count all the bricks, Rand? I just couldn't believe it when I saw that. It's like, no, really? You're going to try to pretend that that's for real? I mean, we don't audit Fort Knox. We don't audit the Pentagon. Nobody does any real audits with any of this stuff. I think it's one of the reasons why you got a guy who is the investment advisor for State Street says that, and again, this is one of the big three. You know, you got Vanguard, State Street, and the one that everybody knows, BlackRock. He says $5,000 gold is back in play. Well, it's getting really close to that, isn't it? And he said 10,000 is a matter of when, not if.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, a long enough timeline, which is crazy to me because always people ask me, where do you think gold's going to go? And I'm like, have you just looked at the charts in the last, 5 years per se, or even 10 years? When I bought my first ounce of gold, it was, $300 an ounce.
Mm-hmm.
So this is back when I was 22. So I'm 46 now. I mean, I think you can just set your watch to it because you're looking at a long-term debasement of the U.S. dollar and the U.S. financial system. And they really have they can classify it as, really smart and they're above it all. And they have all these scientific theories. Really, it's just an expansion of the money supply. They hit the print button. I mean, to put it in the simplest of terms, they're going to expand the money supply to prop up the system as long as it'll be propped up. And then, you look at other countries, they may be looking to revalue their currencies and denominate it in something gold back. Certainly, it would interest the Chinese or the BRICS nations to do that. I think it's one of the reasons why China's been accumulating so heavily and even off the books since the beginning of this century, massively stockpiling gold. I think that's one of the reasons they'd like to not only be outside of the U.S. system, but reclassify their holdings in gold. And I think the rest of the world will follow. And it's going to be dealt, I think, a lot in the physical form, David. We're in a
Mm-hmm.
post-trust financial era.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the rest of the world is just looking on and saying, okay, well, if I'm going to be trading in something, it needs to be something I can verify, trust but verify. That's why these storage facilities are popping up in places like Hong Kong in order to trade the physical trade. That's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people ask about. It's neat. ETF inflows are net positive right now on both gold and Bitcoin. They have been for the last 30 or 60 days. There's a lot of inflows into the exchange traded funds for both of those assets. And I think that's a reason for that. And that's just a small portion of the retail sector. If you look at the rest of the world and their appetite for finite assets or sound money or strategic assets, it is massive. And I think that should be your indicator of where the rest of the world's heading. And meanwhile, we're buying back our own bonds, which is something isn't right, and and devaluing those and not I signaling to the markets that we really can't tolerate higher interest rates or bond yields.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You know, you're talking about the flows into ETFs for gold and Bitcoin. I understand an ETF for something that's physical like gold. Somebody doesn't, they trust these institutions, which I don't trust, and something that they don't get involved with actually physical delivery of it, but it's something that they can trade quickly or whatever. I don't, as you pointed out before, I don't really understand why somebody would get an ETF of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin. Why not just buy the Bitcoin yourself? I don't understand that at all. I mean, again, you're talking about an electronic transaction rather than having something that is physical. But I don't understand the Bitcoin ETFs, and I don't understand when you look at what is happening with the paper gold, with the ETF stuff. I started buying gold that way until gold started moving. And when gold started moving, I realized that the ETFs were not moving along with the gold. And I thought, what's going on with that? And a little bit more investigating, I found out that you're not actually buying gold. What you're doing is you're buying shares into a fund that says that they own gold, but you're not actually buying gold when you get the ETF. And of course, you don't have any claim that you can get any physical delivery of it. It's not like some kind of a commodity future out of Chicago Board of Trade. Not that you want to have a whole bunch of pork bellies show up on your doorstep at any point in time, but still, theoretically, you could get that, but you can't get that from these ETFs of GLD and SLV.
Yeah, the ETFs allow you to basically lock in a trade at the spot price. Is it backed by gold? Probably, mostly, but at some level, you're never going to get paid gold. If you cash out your gold ETFs, they send you fiat.
Yeah.
And it gives people the ability to trade in the gold market without actually having to store it, without having to, worry about shipping or any of those logistical things. I would prefer to worry about it because I don't like counterparty risk and I like the tradability. And I think people underestimate how liquid gold actually is. If people knew how liquid gold was, especially if you have a trusted dealer or a source to turn it into fiat, you probably wouldn't keep a lot of cash in the future. I mean, it's something like for me, I mean, honestly, I would hold most of my holdings in gold or silver physical rather than, any sort of paper. I don't have any paper, I don't think, maybe some mining stocks. But the reason people do the ETFs and Bitcoin, David, mostly it's older generations are the only people that have money in this country anymore, and they don't understand Bitcoin. They don't understand crypto. It gives them a chance to expose some of their capital to the Bitcoin markets without having to hold it. And that's unfortunate because Bitcoin was meant to be held by individuals and
Yeah.
to be an asset that without counterparty risk, and you have that through your wallet and the keys that you have to your wallet. And unfortunately, we have stories that come out like the cold card wallets that hit about a month ago where they were hacked. Like these are cold storage wallets that they lost I think it was like $1 billion or some crazy
Wow.
number. It was a lot of Bitcoin
See,
that was taken off people's
that's the
cold
thing that
storage.
bothers me about all that stuff. It's like if I've got a wallet, this is something like so you got a safe, okay, and you got a safe that's on Main Street in New York or something, and you got millions of people walking by this thing every day, and you're just hoping that there's not a safe cracker that's going to walk by there. And when you put something out there like Bitcoin, you've got the criminals of the world can have eyes on that, and can take a crack at that. That's the thing that concerns me about it.
There certainly always is a risk, and a lot of the Bitcoiners, and I'm a Bitcoiner. I mean, you can classify me as that. Will tell you, oh, you can't hack into it. It's completely safe. Well, it's not. I mean, there are
Mm-mm.
things that there are backdoors and ways, and you got to really know about the wallet that you're holding your Bitcoin in. One of the things that I've done is I borrow against my Bitcoin every so often with a third party company that lends against it. Get about 50% of the LTV, loan to value, and I think it's pretty safe in there because first you got to pay off my loan. So that's one of the reasons I'll have my Bitcoin held over there. Sometimes I'll just borrow against it, but that is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so as far as all assets are concerned, right now, I mean, if you look at silver, it's probably the dark horse. It has the most room to move. We saw it in January at $120 an ounce, up from its all-time high of $52 in 1980. It's breaking records, and there was a sell-off, and then you had the Iran war start. So now you get gold to silver ratio is about 67 to 1. So it's down right now,
Mm.
but futures, if you look at all the demand, if you look at even sovereign buyers like China, India, the rest of the planet that runs on silver, it's massive. We've already got millions of ounces of deficits that are going to be on the books this year where you have to take from the above ground supply. Mining hasn't caught up yet. In the long term, silver is the best, I think, financial play. And again, this isn't an investment advice. This is more or less like talking about where we're going to be denominated in dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Gold's more liquid, faster to get access to. And then Bitcoin, I think, is another long term play. But you always have that risk. I mean, when you don't hold it in your hand and you can't put it in your own safe or store it somewhere completely safe, everything has a risk. All of these assets do. But I think the number one risk of all is just sticking to the standard, economic system we grew up with, thinking that the dollar will be like it was yesterday because it is today. And clearly, you can see the writing on the wall. They're moving into a different era with the dollar, maybe error, like you always point out. Maybe it's not an error, it's an error. But they're going to move into a completely different system, and that those telltale signs are there. I mean, with the strategic metal move on the executive order, classifying gold as a sanctionable asset because that props it up and puts it into a category as money. So we're
Hmm.
signaling that again. And then the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, reclassifying gold as, the $1.2 trillion number when it's not valued on that on the Treasury's books. It's at $42 an ounce.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when we look at the gold to silver ratio, you said it's about 67 now. Isn't it historically about 13 or so? Do I remember that correctly? What was the historical
Yeah, you're
number?
you're right. It's historically it's between 10 and 20. The
Mm.
highest being
Hmm.
about 20. The United States, when it was founded, classified silver to gold at 16 to 1. And that stayed that way until 1933. And we all know, Franklin Roosevelt's executive order had the gold turned in, people turned in their gold, and then he raised the price from $20.67 an ounce for gold to $35 an ounce and increased the money supply. And after that, the ratios have been a bit off, and because that's an artificial system. But I think is even if you look at geologically, David, it's 17 to 1. So for every ounce of gold in the earth, there's about 17. That's what geologists say about silver. So historically, geologically, all based on reality and real economics, we're looking at between 10 and 20 to 1. There's times, and I mean, I've been live on air with you when it's broken over 100 to 1.
Yeah.
And that's been, by the way, that's been in the last year. Gold was
Mm-hmm.
like $3,500 an ounce, and silver was $35 an ounce. And so at times it's even been 125 to 1. So these numbers are completely skewed and not based off reality. I don't think that the silver suppression trade can be done the way that it used to. I think once we broke that all-time high, all bets are off, and the shorts and everything else that they had that was suppressing silver for so long, and the buybacks that they did and the shorting of the market, you don't see that anymore. So I
Mm-hmm.
think silver has a lot of room to run. Um, and it's not like we're not going to have another 1980 moment, David. I mean, it has to do with the economics that we've discussed earlier, which is the debt, the ability to manipulate markets, the debt to GDP, interest rates, all of that. Monetary metals are back in a big way, and they're not going away. They're not going to be shelved because
Mm-hmm.
it benefits the dollar or the system, the
Mm-hmm.
debt basis that we have. I think we're only going to see increases in price denomination.
I agree. Yeah, we go back and you talk. I've got a comment here about gold backs because you're talking about how people don't realize just how liquid gold is. It's a comment from Hatchcar61. He goes, "Question for Tony: will you be providing additional choices for gold backs in the future? I love the Wolfpack," he said.
Oh,
And
I
of course,
appreciate
for
that.
people who are just tuning in, the Wolfpack, if you don't know, that's the ability to be able to tell Tony, I want to save X amount of dollars per month from 50 on up to, I don't know what the top limit is. Maybe you could tell people what that is. But, you just set it up for a monthly purchase that is a planned thing. So you can gradually accumulate gold and silver, and you can dollar cost average that way.
Yeah, the question's a great one because I love the Goldback Company. One of their representatives comes by and visits me in Texas about every couple of months, and has been gracious to give us lines of credit. Because we buy a lot of Goldbacks. I got on their radar a couple of years ago because we started putting the Goldbacks into Wolfpack. And the great thing about Goldback is if you go to their website, they have a chart, and it shows you in real time what each Goldback is worth and their tradability, and it shows you locations and businesses that accept Goldbacks as payments, and they go by those charts. So it stays very stable. That's
Yeah.
another great thing about the Goldbacks. There's a stable price denomination, so whenever you purchase a Goldback, it's going to be pretty standard, and that network is only growing. I mean, in 5 years, I don't know. I mean, I assume they would double or triple or quadruple where they are right now, and businesses that accept Goldbacks. And the longer that we see this debasement trade and the decline in the supremacy of the dollar, Goldbacks will play a large role. It's one of the reasons I put them in to Wolfpack. And So yes, we will carry whatever Goldback has available. We've stick to the smaller denominations. That kind of limits us. You can always order from us direct, but because of Goldback, we try to because of the Wolfpack and the way that the dollar system is, like how much they cost, it helps us round out the smaller Goldbacks. I think we put Goldbacks and everything up to the 250 range, and after that, it's just a physical gold bullion.
Now, I've got some of this from you. Do they put a dollar denomination value on it or something? I know the value is really going to be fluctuating all the time. You find that on the website chart. But do they put the number of ounces on it? How do they denominate that? I forget.
Yeah, there's a ratio that it like for each unit. It's like how many like meltable, not ounces, but the measurement of meltable, like the ratio and how it's divisible. So it's not actually based off a dollar. It's just based off their unit of measurement. And so if you have like a one Goldback, it's not necessarily supposed to be a dollar. You can go to the Goldback website and it'll show you like a one Goldback is worth so many dollars. And that's the standard trade or what they value it at the time. And that, again, that stays pretty steady. I like them for a lot of reasons. They're physical, which, outside of that counterparty risk, I mean, nobody can hack your Goldback wallet, which is really good. And if you're going to be, trading or something like that, they're very recognizable. I would assume it would be pretty hard to counterfeit those. I mean, you'd have to go out of your way because of the intricacy of the artwork and just how it looks and how it feels. So I really like Goldbacks. I think they're a good hedge against the dollar system, and they're not expensive. They don't, I mean, obviously the meltable gold doesn't really trunk necessarily with the dollar denomination, but you get the stamp, you get the certification of it, which I think is it's better than having a dollar in your pocket.
That's right.
I can tell you that.
That's right. Yeah, and the reason I ask that question is because they'd always put out, well, here we got $1 gold coin, but because of physical content, it may be worth a lot more than that or a lot less than that if they've contaminated it. But it also takes away this issue that you have if you go with a gold coin or something, and you want to go to a store to buy something. How do you handle that? Well, that's the answer. They're with the Goldbacks. I mean, you don't have to. If somebody was in a store, it's like, unless they're Rand Paul running the store, you don't just say, "Hey, look, this is gold." And you go, "Oh yeah, I believe that," because it's gold colored. They would have to do some kind of an assay against it to make sure that it was pure gold, and have to weigh it and all this other stuff. But no, that's what's taken care of with the Goldbacks. That's a great idea. And when we go back and you were talking about Bitcoin, I always think about it when there was this particular instance where a guy who was kind of monitoring big transactions in terms of Bitcoin. And that in and of itself, I thought was significant. That people can see when there's big transactions, when they talk about a whale does something, right? So he sees this transaction going through $900,000. And he thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I wonder why somebody did nearly $1 million. He tracks it down, and he's able to figure out who it belongs to. And he calls the guy that did the transaction, and he asks him, why did you sell $1 million worth of Bitcoin? The guy's a billionaire. He didn't even know it was gone. It was news to him. And so I said, okay, that tells me a lot of things about Bitcoin that I wanted to know to avoid actually getting any serious money into it, because it's visible to everybody, and it can be stolen from you, and you don't even know it.
It's very possible and not likely though. And most of the time, if even if you're somewhat educated on how to keep a wallet in good standing and not share your passkeys, you're going to be okay. So it has some pitfalls, and those should be recognizable. And I think quantum computing also shows there's a threat that some of those older wallets held by Satoshi that have sat out there for since the inception of Bitcoin, since 2009. Could be hacked, and that Bitcoin could flood the market. Even so, the issue with Bitcoin, I think it's not perfect. And so I think you can get a lot in the Bitcoin space, which I've been in the space for 10 years. You can get people that are kind of cultish about it. It's the only asset. It's going to demonetize everything else. It'll demonetize gold and silver. I don't believe that, but I think it's going to play a large role, mainly because it's the antithesis of what the dollar is, Dave. If you look at the scarcity of it.
We got to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with Tony, and we're going to talk about the other scam, which is the Federal Reserve.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Klaus, your annual global risk report makes for a stunning and sobering read. For the global business community, the top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation, followed closely by polarization within our societies.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You are listening to The David Knight Show.
Back with Tony Arterburn of Wise Wolf Gold. And again, you get to Tony through davidknight.gold. The Federal Reserve is meeting today in Jackson Hole. And everybody is focused on this. And I think it's just another example, Tony. We talked about so many other indicators and harbingers that we see out there of things that are coming. And yet everybody is so laser focused, not so much on quantitative easing, not so much on the circular debt nonsense that's going on, but about what are they going to do with interest rates, even though this is just minutia. When you talk about what would actually have to be done and the fact that their hands are tied, they can't raise it like Volcker did. But we see the markets reacting to this kind of nonsense, just like they react to every kind of statement from Trump about the Iran war or what's going to happen with the Strait of Hormuz. This is yet another example of that, isn't it? What do you think this is going to do in terms of, there's already rumors that the PCE data that has come out is going to give them some wiggle room to maybe do something with interest rates that's going to affect inflation. But when we look at the inflationary indicators, to me, it really is things like Trump wanting to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. It tells me they're not serious at all about doing anything fundamental.
Well, would it surprise anyone if in the next 2 or 3 years they just passed a bill where there's a permanent removal of a debt ceiling because it doesn't matter anymore? I mean, Dick Cheney said deficits don't matter. That's the thinking by the ruling elite. The mathematics, they don't care about that. Math doesn't matter. Logic doesn't matter. The reason that the markets move is a very short-term, myopic look. It's based off of these like vulture capitalism, people like Mitt Romney that are just trading off, feeding off the system itself. They're not long-term holders of value or building anything. So that's a lot of these things are just numbers on a screen. So, what is the Fed going to do? Is it going to stay put? Is it going to lower rates? Is it going to raise rates? I mean, all of that stuff is probably completely irrelevant in a 1 to 2 year timeline. For 5 years, it's 100% irrelevant. It won't matter because you're talking about a completely different reality. So I try not to get sucked into that, where I just go, well, it's probably going to move the price of gold. Whenever I see the market respond, oh, happy days are here and everything's great, and they're going to either lower rates or raise rates or whatever Warsh is going to do, which is interesting. Warsh was brought in under the guise that everybody really thought, because Trump pushed so hard to get rid of Powell and to demonize Powell, even like the building is like the criminal inquiry that they did on his expansion of the Federal Reserve building, all that stuff that's never really happened before. And you think, well, the first thing Warsh is going to do is he's going to come in and just, take the governor off of the mechanism and lower interest rates and just print a lot of cash. They didn't do that. One of the reasons I think why is because of the Iran war and the raising of the price of crude, which affects everything, which can create inflation itself, not just the expansion of the money supply. But he's been like this head fake. I think it's between, Warsh and Scott Bessent. They both have a way of just head faking. They're both playing a game and have nothing to do with the prosperity of the American people or the dollar system.
I agree.
But who benefits? It's the insiders are going to benefit. And I always tell people you can minimize all this garbage just by boiling it down. Like, do you believe in 5 years that the dollar is going to be worth the same, more, or less? If you look at the metrics and the math from 1913, when the U.S. financial system was hijacked by the international banking cartels, the debasement of the dollar is 99%. So, I'm going to bet on debasement And
Well, Ray
I'm gonna be
Dalio
better.
said 3 years just this last week. And he said, I think we're going to have a massive deficit crisis in just 3 years. And so Trump then says, well, let's raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. Let's add another 12.5%, just like that, you know? And so, yeah, they're not paying any attention or taking it that seriously. And of course, it's not just Ray Dalio who's saying that. There's a lot of people who are saying that.
Yeah, he's not alone, and I think that one of the most apt uh, prognostications would be Larry Lepard, who wrote the book The Big Print, and the thesis is that basically things become so overwhelming, not just for the U.S. but the entire world financial system, because it's fiat based, debt based. We don't have the monetary order that we had post World War II is completely destroyed. From 1971 onwards, we're no longer on a standard or a gold standard where there's a set price and a currency. So they're going to have to print, and they're going to do a huge print. I mean, it'll be something that's unprecedented, and then they'll go for the reset, and maybe that's a digitized system. The banking system itself will most likely be consolidated, David. That's really what we've witnessed in the last 10 years or 20
And what
years.
they'll do
is
is
just
tokenize all these natural resources that we've got and things that the government claims that it owns, which they don't really own constitutionally. But maybe something like that. It seems to me like that's kind of been in the cards from day one of this Trump regime that's here.
Yeah, they will figure out a way and what's best for them and their holdings, and those that don't play ball will be left by the wayside. And that's something for the average person. That's one of the reasons I'm still on air and I talk about it. I think it's important to understand the monetary system, and it's important to understand that it's going to be manipulated. There will be debasement. There will be devaluation, not only of currency but of stocks. IRAs, 401ks, all these things that are tied to the system that relies on that debt-based injection is I think very vulnerable. Hard assets in this, especially this decade and beyond, will be very important.
I agree. And if you want to get some hard assets like gold and silver, the place to get it is with Tony. He can handle large transactions. He can handle small transactions. He can help you to save on a monthly basis and dollar cost average that stuff out at Wolfpack. And again, you can find it at davidknight.gold. Is there anything else that you want to tell people? Do you have your broadcast today at the end after mine?
I do. I wasn't able. I'm sorry. Last week, I was meeting with my accountants in Las Vegas, and my website had an issue, and we're still working some of the bugs out. You put something out on the internet anymore. We've been there for 4 years with Wolfpack. There was an issue. None of the customers' data was in jeopardy ever, but it was people were having a hard time checking out. And if you ever have an issue with Wolfpack, please email me if there's anything on wolfpack.gold that you see that needs improvement. We'll definitely respond to it very quickly. But you can go to davidknight.gold if you've got any questions on precious metals. Again, the reason we set up Wise Wolf and Wolfpack was for everyday people. We don't have a minimum. We don't have a call center where you're going to be treated like a number. And you can dollar cost average, which nobody does like we do. You can start it even with a kid's package as low as $35 a month. And promo code David, by the way, gets you some free constitutional silver. And the limit is 5,000 on the returns. But after that, it just behooves you to go direct with us, so you don't have to pay a credit card fee.
Yeah, that's great. I really like what you do there. And of course, we're in a situation right now. You need to think of this as not a way to get rich quick, but a way to protect the value of your money that you work so hard to earn. That's really what gold and silver do for you. They keep that value there. The dollar is going all over the place, and it looks to me like it's got one direction it's going to be going in the near future. And you don't want to be on that train. So there's one way that you can distance yourself from this insane government that we have, and that is with a physical gold and silver. You can find that at davidknight.gold and use the code David to get some extra goodies there from Tony. Thank you so much for doing that, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
decoding the mainstream propaganda. It's the David Knight Show.
And again, I want to go back and let's pick up where we left off with this court case. You had the Second Circuit Court of Appeals joined another 8 Court of Appeals, so we now have 9 of them saying you have a right to film the police in public. But that was not really the only thing that came out of this case. And I think if you look at it, there's basically 3 things that came out of this, and I don't see it as a victory. First of all, yes, you have the right to record in public. But then, of course, they're going to say that you do because they say, we've got a right to record you as well. So what they're doing is they're underscoring the police and the government's ability to record you in public. And yet, when you look at what they're going to do with that, if you find them doing something that is a clear constitutional violation, violating the guardrails of the Constitution, breaking the law, they have immunity. And that was what came out of this case as well. He said, this is a false arrest. This is, and he had a long list of different things that he had sued these police officers for. And they said, no, they got immunity. They can do whatever they want. So that is, to me, a big loss. But then you add to that the idea that you have to ID yourself to people all the time when they demand it. And if you don't ID yourself, then that is a crime and they can arrest you for it. And they can do all kinds of things too. So I think, when you look at those 2 aspects of it, you got to carry your identity papers, please. Now they're extending that to everything that you do on the internet. I think that is a net loss. And again, I'll just repeat, we don't have courts that are going to stand by the Constitution. I mean, we even had Scalia, who's supposed to be Mr. Strict Constructionist, Mr. Constitution. Before he died, under strange circumstances, and it was strange. I went to that ranch to report on it. Anyway, he said, no, your 4th Amendment doesn't apply at the airport. These people are saying it doesn't apply on the roads. It doesn't apply all these other places. It does apply. There are no exceptions in the Constitution. So you are modifying the Constitution. You're not being an originalist when you say that. The courts are not going to protect your rights. Jury nullification is going to protect your right. If the law is unjust, they're not guilty. If the punishment is cruel and unusual and excessive, you must acquit. And that's the thing that you need to take away from this story. And you need to always remember that. And remember that the courts are very hostile to jury nullification. Well, one way that you can nullify the actual surveillance is with an interesting shirt that a guy came up with. He designed what the headline here calls a hideous Hawaiian shirt. See if you can pull that article up, Travis. I didn't put that in the deck to show people what this thing looks like. He actually used AI to design this. And it was something that the father of the cyberpunk genre, William Gibson, had talked about in his 2010 novel, Zero History. The idea that there'd be a shirt that was, quote, beyond punk, beyond art, fundamentally somehow an affront to your eyes, and it would help you to avoid the tracking. As I point out in this article from Futurism, the computers don't really recognize people. What they do is they recognize a lot of statistical aspects of people. And so, as they show in that picture on the article, they have a crowd of people, and there are rectangles around everybody except the guy wearing the shirt. And it doesn't see him. It just becomes invisible, which is kind of an unusual thing, isn't it? Even though we can clearly recognize him as a human being. The pink, orange, and green blobs plastered on the shirt are meant to break the continuity of the body's outline, so the detector can no longer bind the parts together into one figure. And again, he used AI to design it, which is kind of interesting. He used a kind of trial and error that he called an adversarial loop. This guy has had a history of showing the flaws in technology and how it can be exploited. His name is Weichert. He's in Germany. And previously, back in 2020, he put a ton of phones in a wagon and rode it through Berlin, and you would see moving traffic jams going through Berlin. Everybody's like, what's going on? Because it's constantly reading your location on your phone and looking to see if cars are not moving and that type of thing. So when it saw all these phones collected together, it was like this moving traffic jam, and it really surprised people. They couldn't figure out what was going on with it. This is something that was sent to me by a listener, by a Subscribe Star supporter, and he actually sent this to me on Sunday I've been meaning to talk about this all week, and it is a very interesting indication of where we are in terms of this police surveillance network and how it is really being brought to us by these reprehensible people in Silicon Valley, the technical gurus that want to rule the world here. This is about a video game, Grand Theft Auto version 6, which is really kind of one of the biggest games out there. It's been a few years since they have done it, and they're making a very, very big deal out of the release. And so just as a backstory and as context for this, they have been teasing this for a very long time. They put out a lot of different trailers. They even have a teaser trailer for the trailer that's going to come out. And the trailer that's going to come out, they're going to charge people, as he points out, to see this in advance, but you're only going to have about a 6-hour window. I mean, we had videos that were released. They would typically give us a 6-month video window before it would go into cable back in the day when we had video stores. But so now you get 6 hours. But what will happen in those 6 hours, the people who pay for it will do a little video report, and they'll put it up on their YouTube channel that they've monetized, and that will help them. So it makes sense for them. It doesn't make sense for anybody else unless you are absolutely obsessed with this stuff. But the game, as he points out, is extremely overhyped, and everybody is desperate to get some information about it. And there's somebody that identifies themselves as CyberLeak, and they spell it L-E-E-K. And they've been releasing a bunch of snippets showing parts of the game. And it's pretty clear they have access to this game because they have used a gun to shoot their name into the wall, CyberLeak. And they have continued to release things. They just had this week the 13th release showing glimpses of the game. This is really got the company that put it out named Take-Two Interactive. It's really got them furious. So that's the background in all this. So what they have done is they have called on Microsoft and on Discord, said, give us the information that you have been keeping on people who use Windows, people who go to the Discord website. Give us that kind of information because we need to find out who this guy is and shut him down. They're very concerned about that. So that demand has really shone a light on the kinds of information that these people are keeping on us and the capability that gives them as well. And if you remember, we've talked many times about how Microsoft is part of a coalition, the CCPA, I call it. It is the Content Coalition for Provenance, that is who created this, and authentication. And it is, I think, also really kind of the Chinese Communist Party of America tactic. It is the Chinese who are way ahead in the surveillance stuff. We can't let them get ahead. I mean, we got a surveillance gap. We need to be surveilling our people as much as the Chinese are surveilling their people, right? And so I want to thank JM, who is a Subscribe Star supporter. Thank you for supporting us, first of all, and thank you for bringing this to my attention. As he points out, he said, this has the potential for people to be passively caught out in this just because they went to the wrong website at the wrong time or other indicators that are false. And of course, we have seen this. We saw this with January the 6th, didn't we? You're in Washington, and we're going to turn this information over to the government. Just because you're in Washington now or in that vicinity, you are now a suspect. And we're going to start auditing your life and see if there's anything else in it. So Bank of America gives them the lists of people who had bought guns on using their credit card from Bank of America or some kind of a Bank of America transaction. I guess it could even be a check. So I said, well, here's the people on your list that have bought guns, so they're obviously dangerous, and you should investigate them as well. No crime at all. But again, this goes back to all of your identity papers. Everything you do on the web, it's got to be identified. They are manic about that, and they want to make it even more explicit and direct. That's what Marcia of the Beast Blackburn wants to do. But when you look at the kinds of information that they're putting out there, it is very instructive. Microsoft has been asked, actually what they did was they subpoenaed Microsoft, this company, the game company, subpoenaed Microsoft as well as Discord. They said they want Microsoft to supply, quote, all internal Microsoft business records and investigation records associated with their internal investigation of CyberLeak. They said for each returned account, please provide the account ID, registration email, registration and last login IP address, phone numbers, linked connections, any associated device identifiers. They know they have identifiers to identify your computer, even if they don't get some of the other aspects of it. So you use a different email, they can still tell who you are by the MAC address that's on your computer. Content related to Grand Theft Auto, Rockstar, or CyberLeak from their OneDrive account. Yeah, they want everything on the cloud because now it is searchable, isn't it? From Discord, they're asking for, quote, all user accounts that are or were members communicating with a number of the Discord servers associated with the leaks. And again, as I point out, this is somebody who goes by the name of CyberLeak. Why are they doing this? Well, they said that they're very upset about the fact that they're not going to allow people to have physical copies of the games. This is all about the fact that you will own nothing. Remember that? And they extend this to everything, even to the games that they intend to use to distract and to pacify us. You will not own those either. And so what CyberLeak has done, especially I think it was in this last one, he's got his character going to a traditional video game store, right, where you got all the racks of physical goods that are there. He's browsing through the different boxes. Over in the corner, you can see a PlayStation 5 that is operating. And that is something that is not really new. Again, that was at the very beginning of the video business. The video stores, the movie studios claimed that they owned everything in perpetuity. Even if you bought it, they still owned it. We're back to that now again. And what has happened is the Video Store Software Dealers Association, which was the retail association for video stores, challenged that, took it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said the obvious, said, if you sell somebody something, you don't have a right to tell them what they can do with it. And so that was called the doctrine of first sale. And it said, well, if you sell that to them, they can resell it, they can rent it, they can do whatever they want to with it. And that basically legitimized the video business. You remember in the early years, they were creating this video club. You would join a club and so forth. That was a way to skirt around the requirements from the movie studios who didn't want you renting this stuff. They said, it's the same type of thing we have to do to get raw milk today. And so they were able to turn that back, and now they're coming back again because these people who create the content, they want to own it 100% forever. When you look at what the movie companies do, the movie studios, they never give most of the revenue to the movie theaters. Movie theaters have to sell you high-priced popcorn and drinks in order to make their money. What they'll do is they'll say, well, we'll cover your nut, which is basically your overhead, and then we'll take all the rest of the profits from that. And so if they want to make a profit, they've got to sell refreshments and candy. But they're back to that type of thing now. And we have seen several examples of books and other things where we just had, what was it, Sony, I think, was it, Travis, that did that? They said, we sold you this movie, but now our license for that movie has expired. And so now we're moving it off the devices.
I believe it was Sony that did that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on with that? I mean, you basically sold this to me under false pretenses. You didn't have really the right to sell it to me, if we understand what selling is. But if they keep this stuff on the cloud, and if they don't give you physical media, they can remove this stuff all the time. And so when this guy goes to the video store or the games, he's looking at boxes, he's looking at an old PlayStation 5, which would let you have physical media. And there's a sign up that says X Rentals for sale. And that's what he says is the reason that he is doing this. We should be very concerned about this.
What's interesting is that when the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One came out 10 years or more ago now, probably about 12 to 14, Xbox had originally said, well, you're not going to be able to share video games. We don't want to use physical media anymore. You know, people can pass them around, and, you know, we're selling fewer copies because of that. And everyone hated that. They lost market share because of it. And Sony even put out a press release, a commercial where they said, here's how you share games on PlayStation. And they just had one guy hand the game to the other guy.
Yeah, they don't want to have physical media. And just like we were talking about before, you know, the idea of physical gold and silver, Physical has its own qualitative advantage, doesn't it? And we're seeing that more and more, especially because these people, anything that is digital, they can send that down the memory hole very, very quickly. Well, let's talk a little bit about vaccines, because we have a controversy that is bubbling up out of Pennsylvania. And to me, it looks completely contrived. I said that we've had a lot of headline news articles from all different media outlets. It's not just mainstream media, which is trumpeting this, but it is also the alternative mainstream media, if you will, alt media. And everybody's, oh, yeah, we had 2 deaths from measles. And it's like, oh, give me some little bit more details. I don't see any details in any of this stuff. And already we've had in the past, they had a situation that was reported as a couple of measles deaths. And that was debunked by Children's Health Defense when that happened. But the damage was already done. They run with it for several days, and everybody's got that fixed in their head that you're going to die from measles. Well, in terms of the MMR vaccine, you have RFK Jr. confirming, as he was criticized by Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. He said, he's accused me of promoting conspiracy theories because I told him during an earlier telephone conversation that some Americans had religious objections to the MMR vaccine because it contained a fetal tissue. He said, there is no fetal tissue in MMR, he told me. That's the measles, mumps, rubella. He said, however, said RFK Jr., he said the rubella virus used in the MMR2 is grown on the cultured cell line composed of lung tissue from an aborted 3-month-old female embryo listed as WI38 human diploid lung fibroblasts in the ingredients, as portions of these cells end up in each vial of MMR. So I guess we need to spell vial differently. That'd be V-I-L-E. Kennedy included a clip from a videotape disposition of Stanley Plotkin, who invented the MMR vaccine, and it was a deposition that was taken back in 2018. During his testimony, the guy who developed this stuff, Plotkin, admitted to butchering 76 aborted babies, that all of whom were over 3 months old. He doesn't say what the maximum age was. And just one of the many studies that led to the development of his vaccine, quote unquote. Kennedy further noted that approximately 646 billion pieces of DNA from an aborted baby cell line are in every vial of MMR vaccine. He said in addition to the human DNA, there is also an unspecified amount of human cellular debris in each dose of MMR. Plotkin said at the time that he was, quote, cognizant of objections to the inclusion of aborted babies' tissue in the development of vaccines. And he said, and the fact that they are actually a part of the ingredients of the vaccines. He said, I'm aware of those objections. He said the Catholic Church has actually issued a document on that, which says that individuals who need the vaccines should receive the vaccines regardless of the fact of what is in them. And Plotkin said, well, I think that implies that I'm the individual who will go to hell because of the use of aborted tissues, which I am glad to do. Well, he's glad to go to hell. Okay, that's fine. He's defiant, godless murderers who don't ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness is there even for people like him. But he doesn't want it. He's too proud. He won't take the free gift. And of course, these types of people like Stanley Plotkin are the backbone of quote unquote medicine and quote unquote science. It is the pharmakia, the great wealthy men of the world who will not repent of their murders. Boy, isn't that Stanley Plotkin in a nutshell? I think it absolutely is. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Welcome back. And I want to talk a little bit more about this, what I believe is a false narrative about 2 people dying in Pennsylvania, but also the controversy that the governor of Pennsylvania created with RFK Jr. over the fact that there is tissue, DNA, and there really is, according to the guy who did this stuff, Stanley Plotkin. So again, he's saying that there's about, he aborted about 76 babies and butchered them, according to him. And he's unrepentant of that. He's served as a consultant for Big Pharma for decades. He admitted to Aaron Siri during the 2018 deposition that he used experimental vaccines on orphans and on the mentally ill for testing purposes. Think about that. I mean, this is Dickensian, isn't it? I mean, always Charles Dickens would talk about how orphans were abused. Then here we have Big Pharma coming along and doing it today. Now, they are the villains of our time, aren't they? During a December 2024 interview with Tucker Carlson, Aaron Siri told his son Horst that some childhood vaccines have literally millions of pieces from the cultured cell line of an aborted fetus in every single injection, and that vaccines are cultivated on aborted fetal tissue that is alive. So after Shapiro criticized Kennedy, you had Siri get on social media and say, and back it up. He says, yeah, RFK Jr. is correct. The fact is that there are billions of fragments of human cellular debris and DNA from the cultured cell lines of an aborted fetus in every injected dose of MMR, chickenpox, and Hep A vaccines. He also provided links to articles that chart the use of the aborted fetal cell tissue in the development of the vaccines. And so Governor Shapiro also accused me, said, of promoting vaccine misinformation. When I asked him for an example, he was unable to provide one. But that didn't stop him from repeating the charges in the later press conference. So he doesn't have any examples of how this is operated, but he is still repeating this as he goes on. He said, Governor Shapiro also faulted me for a decline in Pennsylvania vaccination rates going down from 97 to 93. And now they want people to believe that because of that, we've got kids who are dying. This is what RFK Jr. had to say about it.
We're trying to get information about those 2 casualties. According to a statement that was released by the Lancaster County Commissioner today, they cannot find any measles deaths in Lancaster County. And they complain that the governor will not give them that information. The CDC tried to get that information from the governor yesterday, and the state is refusing to cooperate. We're doing a better job than any country in the world at controlling the measles outbreak. This is a worldwide epidemic. And
no, it's not.
Happening because of the lockdowns, because many kids did not get vaccinated during the lockdowns.
So this is why I part company with him.
Dramatic diminishment of public faith in the regulatory agencies during the COVID period because of government overreaching, because of the gaslighting and the manipulation. So even in my discussion with Governor Shapiro yesterday, and he said to me, well, we've seen this big drop in vaccination rates in the state from 97 to 92.3. He admitted on the phone that it all happened during the Biden administration. Since I've been in office, since President Trump's been in office, there's been a 0.1% diminishment. We are actually restoring faith.
Okay, so I'm not interested in talking about which administration is better at getting kids vaccinated with this horrific, useless stuff. I don't believe any of this. I don't believe the virus. I don't believe the pandemic. He's a limited hangout when he tells people that. But it is true that when you look at, he's saying this is coming from Lancaster County. Of course, the Amish are in Lancaster County, so that gives it some credibility because we know that they've never been vaccinated. And yet, why all of a sudden the timing? The Amish never get vaccinated. And so what he's saying is we've had the first deaths in 35 years right there in Lancaster County. Well, why didn't anybody die from measles for the last 35 years? They weren't getting vaccinated then either. And when I grew up, we didn't have an MMR vaccine. It wasn't even developed until after I was no longer a child, and so it wasn't really an issue that was there. Yet, I had never heard of any, and none of our parents had ever heard of anyone dying from measles. If they'd heard of that, they would have had caution. Instead, they believed that measles was a contagion and that you could pass that on to other people. So it's like, yeah, let's get everybody together. Let's somebody's got measles, go down there and get it over with. You'll have lifetime immunity. You don't need to have multiple MMR shots. If you have something, if it is whatever this is, again, I have gotten to the point where I no longer believe in vaccines. I don't believe in viruses or virology either. I think it's a fraud. And I would reference you to the book by the Baileys, The Last Pandemic, if you want to know why I don't believe that there are viruses out there that are the cause of these diseases. And even the issue of contagion, when you look at the bacteria that show up that they identify as being caused with it, if you look at the dodgy sciences these people have done, it's not like they go out and find somebody who's got this and they're sick, and the people who are not sick don't have this. And that's not the way they're operating at all. As a matter of fact, when you look at this PCR stuff, and this is what they're telling us from the state of Pennsylvania, they're saying, well, this is somebody who was measles associated. What does that mean? That means that they ran a PCR test on them, and they found whatever DNA sequence they were looking for that they identified as measles. Well, the guy who developed it, Kary Mullis, said, you can't use this for diagnosis because if you run the cycles up high enough, and they're magnifying this stuff by 1 trillion. He said, it's almost like this Buddhist idea that everything is in everything else. And he said, if you run it up high enough, you can find anything. And we all have different aspects of different stuff in us all the time, but it's not at a sufficient concentration to actually cause you to be sick. So he says, you can't have this as a diagnostic tool, but that is part of the legacy of Fauci. He was one who started doing that with AIDS and HIV, and Mullis called him out on that, said he was a liar, said it wasn't science, and he had other scientists who called him out. They got purged. And then, of course, Kary Mullis died just a couple of months before they kicked off their pandemic scam. So we see this, and here's an example of it. This is Just the News. And again, this is not mainstream media. This is like alt-stream media. And they just repeat this stuff credulously. 2 people died of measles in Pennsylvania, say state health officials. Both of the cases were unvaccinated people, and that's the only thing they'll tell us about it. They say it was unvaccinated people. They died in Lancaster County, and yet the local Lancaster public health official there said, we don't have any information about that. We'd like to get some information from the state if you know something we don't know. And they won't give it to him. And they won't give that information to the CDC. You think Pennsylvania state official who is working with Shapiro, you think maybe they're lying about this? I do. I'll just say it right here. The health department has confirmed 393 cases in 23 counties of Pennsylvania so far in 2026. Yeah, we got cases here. Remember when Fauci did that? We got people, they're not even sick, but we got cases here because I used my PCR ramped up to 40 cycles or something to get it to 1 trillion. Said nearly 20% of the people who contracted measles have been hospitalized. That means that 80% haven't. Death related to measles occurred in 1 to 3 patients per 1,000 cases. Again, this is a statistic that they have been pushing from the CDC for several years now. I'd like to see the evidence of that. They're not going to show you any evidence of this. They make these pronouncements. The pronouncements are repeated by the media as if they were fact. And it is even here by Just the News. Listen to what they finished their article with. It sounds like it's something from CNN. The MMR vaccine administered over 2 doses boosts a person's immune system and provides 97% lifetime protection. You're not reporting news. You're giving press releases from Pfizer. Stop it. Instead of Just the News, how about giving us just the facts? Well, you're not going to get it from Just the News, but you can get the facts from Children's Health Defense. Yet again, they are spot on with this. They said the 2 measles associated, quote unquote, they looked at the details on this and said, look at the semantics that they're using. Measles associated means that they've used some kind of a laboratory test, I imagine it was a PCR, to produce some evidence that measles is present. But it does not mean that it was the cause of death. So we're back to this COVID nonsense again. Somebody who died with a PCR test saying that they have COVID? Or somebody who died from COVID? No. Yeah, well, I'm not going to buy into that, but everybody's buying into it yet again with this. The announcement linked the deaths to measles, but did not disclose enough patient-specific evidence to determine the chain of events that led to their deaths, or whether measles was listed as an underlying cause of death on the death certificates. The only thing we know about it is they were from Pennsylvania and unvaccinated, and that's it, said Carl Jablonski of Children's Self-Defense. He said, were they 9 years old? Were they 99 years old? Were they immunocompromised? Were they pregnant? Were they infants? Were they battling cancer? Or were they otherwise perfectly healthy? None of that information is being put out. And so the state of Pennsylvania says, well, we've got this secret information we can't share with you because we got to protect their privacy. As they're putting up flock cameras everywhere, right? That information is on the wrong side of a privacy excuse. Health officials chose one characteristic to propagate to the public. You don't know anything about it except they were unvaccinated. Be afraid and go get your vaccine. And so it is the Lancaster Health Commissioner, Josh Parsons, who lambasted the State Department of Health's announcement in Pennsylvania. He questioned the lack of public evidence. He sought clarification from whether the reported deaths occurred in Lancaster County and whether measles was the cause of death or merely a coexisting condition. The coroner's office recorded no deaths caused by measles. Isn't that suspicious? At the same time, you've got the governor, Josh Shapiro, and the people who work for him at the State Department of Health. They have created this national news story of alarm, and yet the people who were there, the coroner's office, the public health commissioner said, we don't know anything about this. It's a lie. Only one death of a person was recorded who had measles, but it wasn't caused by measles, according to the coroner. And it conflicts with the health department's count of 2 measles-associated deaths. So the health commissioner there in the county said government officials won't answer questions to him either. So he said transparency is owed to the public. If you're going to put out a narrative that's created national alarm, you should give us that information. But they won't give it to the guy who is there locally. They won't give it to the CDC either. Perhaps we can understand what's going on with this if we look at past statements from Josh Shapiro. He has pointed out that the vaccine industry and pharmaceutical industry in general is huge for Pennsylvania. It contributed nearly $5 billion to the Pennsylvania economy. And in the past year, I think it was in the last year, look at the date here. We'll get to that here in a minute. He called the press conference to attack RFK Jr., but it was in last year's where this was, that he held the press conference. He said, vaccines aren't just good for the public. Vaccines are good for Pennsylvania's economy because more than half of the vaccines administered in the U.S. are produced in Pennsylvania. It generates nearly $5 billion for the Pennsylvania economy. He said, vaccines are big business for the state. And so what's he doing now? He is pushing that. Shapiro said Pennsylvania was poised for explosive innovation and growth in the life sciences industry. Is that really what they call it? Because it's not about life. It's not about science. And it's not really even about industry. It's about money. And so he said, that's why Eli Lilly chose us for their $3.5 billion investment. So it contributes already nearly $5 billion to the economy. And he said, we're going to have Eli Lilly put in another $3.5 billion. So this is why he is attacking RFK Jr., when the reality is that there is a lot of human debris and DNA in these MMR things. They are contaminated. And the fact is that they have fabricated this measles narrative about 2 deaths in Pennsylvania. And as we're looking at the death that everybody's been talking about this week, Dolly Parton, when we first heard about Dolly Parton's death, the cause of death was given as liver issues and autoimmune issues. I looked at that and I thought, well, that could be from a vaccine, autoimmune. That's something gets kicked off with the vaccines, especially COVID or whatever. And if she took COVID, that could cause liver issues. Certainly, she took remdesivir. That's the issue with remdesivir in a big way. If she believed them on the vaccine stuff, she might have believed them on remdesivir as well. Who knows? Nevertheless, we're now being told that she died at a cancer center there in Nashville. And they said, well, it was a brief battle with cancer. We call that turbo cancer, which is a big indicator that she was a victim of this vaccine stuff. Yes, I know she did commercials for it. And she kind of tried to shame people for not getting the vaccine, showing an example. I believe, though, that she was deceived. I don't blame the victims who are deceived by the people like Fauci and the pharmaceutical medical industry that is out there. I see her as more than a victim. I don't think, certainly she didn't understand what was going on. She would not have taken it if she understood what was really happening. People like Fauci who know, I still have my doubts whether or not they took it. So she was admitted to the Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center Friday, and she died 4 days later. So it was very rapidly advancing cancer that had come up on her and moved very, very quickly. In other words, what we call turbo cancer. And we know something that causes that, as a matter of fact. And we also know, thanks to the overreach of the government regulators, thanks to the mocking of the FDA about ivermectin and these other things, we now know that we've got some effective cancer cures. And let me say that. I know that gets you banned, but there's not that much more they can do to me, actually, than they have already done. So I really don't care anymore. And even if I was trying to stay on places where we are, I would still say, look at this. It appears to be a cancer cure. This is world-renowned cancer biologist Thomas Seyfried, PhD. He said, this is why the parasite medications are working. And we have so many different cases, anecdotal right now at this point, as to why these things, ivermectin, fenbendazole, menbendazole, why these things are working. But we have a lot of people talking about that. And so he goes back and identifies a mechanism and why this works. He said, cancer is not a parasite, but it operates on the same, it needs the same pathways to grow that parasites need to grow. That's why it works.
Once you put the patient in this state of nutritional ketosis, it opens up a new array of drugs that may have been thrown out, not worked. That's called the whole field of repurposing drugs now. But once the body is in this new physiological state, things that were thought to be ineffective become super effective. So again, that's a whole new field that will open as the result once this information gets out more.
And you mentioned mebendazole in your talk as well. Does that have a glutamine blocking aspect to it as well?
Yes, that's in our paper also. That's another interesting thing. Parasite medications. I don't know about ivermectin because there was a lot of political stuff about that. So I said to the lab, we're not going to do that because we didn't want to get the wrath.
Can't talk about it. It's politics. It's not medicine.
Fenbendazole. I said, why people are taking that, and you hear people say, well, I got rid of my cancer with this and that. So I did a dive on it, and I said, why parasite medications work against cancer cells? And it turns out that the parasites use mitochondrial substrate level phosphorylation in the tissue. And these mebendazole, fenbendazole kill these parasites. So I tried it on the cancer cell, and sure as hell, it targets the mitochondrial substrate and glycolysis. So we have a mechanism now why parasite medications are working. But cancer is not a parasite. All these people say, cancer is a parasite. It's not a parasite. Parasites and tumors use a common metabolic pathway, and a drug that works against parasites can be very effective against cancer. And that's what we begin to see, especially under nutritional ketosis. Yeah. Right? Can you imagine this?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So ivermectin, it actually works on the mitochondrial cell death pathway, the BCL2 BAX-BAD pathway. So it actually helps push the cell death pathway.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And you catch the very first part of that, right? Fasting. Fasting opens up a pathway for a lot of these drugs to be even more effective. But we've had so many anecdotal reports of people who said, I had stage 4 metastasized cancer. Started taking these different things, ivermectin, fenbendazole, menbendazole, and it's gone now. No cutting, no radiation, no chemo. It's gone. Well, when we take a look at the cancer that is affecting our country right now, the economic cancer that is affecting us, we have a very clear indication of what is happening. And this is just an example of Trump's failed policies on tariffs. In so many different ways he has failed. We now have an SHTF scenario, right? And the crap is hitting the fan, and we have yet again Trump, the first president to create a toilet paper crisis, is now doing it again. Every time this guy gets in, it is this kind of scenario, isn't it? This is a headline from The Guardian: wiped out. U.S. faces a surging toilet paper prices amid trade war with Canada. Yeah, most toilet paper is made in the United States. It's consumed in the United States, and we consume about 4 times as much toilet paper per capita as any other country does. But we make that here in America. Well, great. We're self-sufficient. No, we got to get, they're getting the lumber, the junk lumber, whatever they use for toilet paper, they're getting that from Canada. So when you put up tariff boundaries and either make this stuff uneconomical or whatever, it's the same thing that he's doing with auto parts. Exactly the same thing. You're crippling American manufacturers because you're putting a restriction on the raw materials. What is the problem with that? I mean, that is just so many levels of stupid. It's unbelievable. For years, we've been told, you don't want to just be some place where people get their raw materials, right? That's not the path to getting wealthy. You want to add value to that. So you want to, use the third world to get your materials from them, and then you use that to make manufactured goods. Now Trump is putting up tariffs and restrictions on us being able to get the raw materials. It absolutely is insane. So a full-fledged trade war that threatens to flush away decades of peaceful trading between the two nations, and it is showing up, first of all, in toilet paper. This administration is pure excrement. He's had one excrement order after the other. They call them executive orders. They're actually excrement orders. And yet again, we see Trump, as I've said so many times, a one-man fourth turning. Global depression, global war. That's what he is all about. He is, I guess this thing likes to operate based on conflict and fights all the time about anything and everything. I guess we could, if he wanted to be a WWE personality, we could call him the Punisher. Maybe we'd call him Mr. Chaos. I don't know. That's what he has been doing. He unveiled a list of nearly 900, actually the Canadians are now matching this, so they unveiled a list of nearly 900 American goods that will face the same tariffs going the other way. Though American toilet paper is made in the U.S., we need those raw materials. U.S. imported about $328 million worth of toilet paper from Canada in 2024, making it by far away the largest exporter of toilet paper to the U.S. So retailers, including Costco, the big amount of stuff that you get at Costco, source much of their paper products from Canada. So it's not just paper products, of course, that could rise in price. The trade war highlights the deep economic ties shared between the two countries as the consumers continue to worry about price inflation on both sides of the border. And that's exactly what we're going to get. It's this tit-for-tat stuff. It's the same thing that happens when some idiot starts a war, right? Oh, well, look, we started the war, but look what they did to us after that. And so then you double down and you do even more of that. That's the same wartime mentality that Trump applies to everything because he's got a WWE mentality for his own celebrity status. Trump is the bringer of war in every aspect, whether you're talking about society or a war with everyone else. It's no wonder that Lindsey Graham loved him, right? He is the god Mars incarnate, isn't he? Canada also is taking a swing at the U.S. fishing industry with a 25% tariff on American fish and seafood, including frozen lobster, which is sold out of Maine, which causes Republican Senator Susan Collins looking at a tough re-election battle to try to distance herself from Trump. She calls this a mistake. That is the understatement of the century. A 25% tariff on Canadian cars and auto parts is set to affect the American auto industry for the same reason. Just like toilet paper, they need to have the aluminum and steel and parts that are coming from Canada. And when you take that away, now all of a sudden the products are more expensive for Americans. They're not competitive internationally. Trump is destroying our industry, just like he's destroying farms and cattlemen. It's across the board. The Trump administration, however, is adamant. You have Jamieson Greer, the U.S. trade representative, says, quote, "There's no possible way the trade dispute with Canada will affect U.S. consumers." Can you believe they tell such a bold-faced lie after we've all seen it? Even after they have admitted it, when they took the tariffs off of the foreign beef coming in. Again, he's a liar. He's already, we've seen this from his previous rounds. He started some of this stuff back in his first regime. Maybe we should start talking about Trump destruction syndrome as TDS. Maybe that's the reality. Maybe it's not delusional. Maybe it is not derangement, but maybe it is destruction. That is the effect that the guy's doing. So much so that when J.D. Vance puts his name on a Republican email solicitation asking for money in a fundraiser, he says in there in the line that, well, if you can't give right now, don't. Groceries cost what they cost. Yeah, just happens, right? Crap happens. And you don't have any toilet paper if you got Republicans like Donald Trump in charge. He says, if you can't get right now, don't, Natalie. Groceries cost what they cost. But can you answer this for me? And then he starts asking some questions about whether you can give him money. He doesn't ask the question, what can I do to lower the cost of groceries? No, he doesn't even ask that question. What could I stop doing to lower the cost of groceries? He doesn't ask that either. As a matter of fact, he says the Republican National Committee needs money. Not really. As I reported yesterday, one outlet said, well, they got $168 million in the bank. The Democrats have a $2 million deficit. This article, however, gives a different figure for that. They say that it is a bit closer. The Republicans have 10 times the amount of money that the Democrats do. They say the Republicans, in the latest FEC filing, available July 31st, said they had approximately $130 million in cash on hand. The DNC in its latest filing said they had $16 million. So still, they're about 10 to 1. They don't need your money. and this is what they're doing when you send them their money. They're putting people like Darlene in charge, even when she's right on a particular issue, and she is right to oppose government health care. That's not going to help anybody. But she can't give the right reasons. And what she says about it is so stupid that it hurts us if we don't want government health care.
Government-run health care. Bad idea after bad idea. Annie Andrews backs them all. My parents worked long, hard hours to make ends meet. If they were sick, they had to get up and go to work because the doors weren't open, we weren't making money. My mother passed away when I was 11 and my father just over a year later.
And so the Democrats are saying, yeah, listen to this. You don't need government health care. Just work. Even when you're sick, you go. And work till you die. That's the way they're spinning this. She is a liability if you don't want to have these policies. Before we run out of time here, I just want to thank Lisa Kay. Thank you so much for the generous Zelle donation. I really do appreciate that. And North American House Hippo, thank you for that donation on Rumble. It says, good morning, everyone. Just did a video of Alexandria Occasional Cortex saying if Abe Lincoln had skipped the play at Ford's Theater and eaten at Hard Rock Cafe next door, he'd be alive today. That's something that should scare you, right? And Dougalog, thank you very much for the tip. He says, thank you, David. Here is a little bit of gas for the tank. Let's all remember to hit the like button. Please do that. Please like and share the broadcast. Thank you for listening. Have a good day. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing and the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. but each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.